This is a podcast with Victor De Frisco from Exit Realty Premier Elite and Chris Airy from Compendium Solutions. Welcome to our show, Leaders with Suspicions. I hope you enjoy.
Right, Victor, first off, where are you connecting with us from today?
From Lake Worth, Florida, which is just a little bit south of West Palm Beach.
Right, so why don't you tell me a little bit about your business, what you do, where you do it, and what makes your business great?
Well, I've been an entrepreneur all my life. I've been in many different businesses. Believe it or not, I started out in the flower industry because that's what my family was in. I owned flower shops. I owned a design center. I owned a stationery store. I've done it all. I've owned a nightclub, and about 25 years ago, my wife decided that she wanted to get in real estate. And not long after that, I don't know why, but I said, you know what? I don't want to drive the car anymore. I want to work for somebody, or I don't want to have the responsibility. Because anybody that's been in business knows there's a lot of responsibility. There could be some anxiety with it. There's, rent to pay. There's employees to pay, taxes to pay. And I said, I want to get a break from that. And she said, well, why don't you come into real estate? So I sold the flower shop I had and I entered into real estate. And I liked real estate because you're in your own business, even as an agent, but I didn't have to worry about it. I operated under somebody else's umbrella. I went with Prudential Florida WCI. They paid the rent, they paid the help, they paid for everything just about. And I split my whatever I made with them. And I kind of liked that. But it wasn't long after that, I was so used to driving the bus that I said, hey, you know what? I think I could do this better. So we looked for a franchise to hook up with because I don't like to reinvent the wheel. And we found Exit. Exit is a Canadian-based company. And the reason I chose Exit was because there was a lot of empathy involved with the company. They cared about people, and it was a very, very a pro agent as opposed to pro broker system, which makes it easier to recruit. When it's about the agents, it's easier for the broker to recruit. So we're in business 25 years. We own our own building. We have tenants in the building. We've come a long way from when we first started. We have about 80 agents here. We have great training. We have great support systems. Technologies with this company is through the roof. And I think we do it very well. And I think we do it all with the agents in mind. And in my view, the agent is my customer. It's not necessarily the guy that buys the house or sells the house. It's the agent. That's my customer. And we have to make the customer happy. And if we make the customer happy, we're probably going to make the public happy. So here we are.
So for those who are watching this recording and don't know the US real estate market, could you tell me where you fit in the chain, right?
Okay, we do, I mean, we do all. I mean, we do some commercial, but we're primarily a residential real estate company. And what a broker does is a broker gives agents the support system, and we have about 80, to service the public. And when I say service the public, that is listing for sale or finding a home for buyers and representing them in the transaction, making sure that, first of all, that they're paying a fair price, that the home is inspected, and financially that they're getting, we try and help them get financing for a home. So we guide them through the transaction, and it's become very complicated. When I first got in the business, it was a 5-page contract for purchase. And now it's like, as of the last hour, it was like 15 pages. It changes constantly, especially now I don't know if it actually hasn't applied to any other countries, but in the United States, the National Association of Realtors was sued last year, or actually longer than that, probably 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And they ended up settling for millions and millions of dollars. In my opinion, it was a money grab for the attorneys because they got 40% of the settlement. And I don't remember, it was actually in the billions of dollars. It wasn't even in the millions of dollars. And the attorneys got probably most of the money, but it's changed the way we do business. We're no longer allowed to advertise cooperating broker compensation on the MLS. So to me, they tried to make something more transparent and they made it less transparent. And they basically confused the public. So the way it traditionally was in this business was you would say, call us up and say, could you come over? I'm interested in listing my home. And I would say to you, Chris, your home, in my estimation is worth X. And in order to sell it, I'm going to charge you 2.5%. I'm just going to use that number because all commissions were always negotiable. Because you could say to me, well, I got a guy that's going to do it for 1.5%. Can you do it for 2%? And I would try and show you why I charge a little bit more. And the reason is probably because I'm going to do more marketing. I'm going to do better pictures. And ultimately, I'm going to get you more for your house because the bottom line is what matters. But anyway, so I would say, and I would also like to make it available to buyer's agents, licensed realtors that get people that come to them that want to buy a house and will represent the buyer. And Chris, how much would you like to offer that buyer's agent? And you'd probably say to me, well, what do you think? Say, well, I would say 2.5%, 3% in order to entice them to show your home. It'll get us more showings. And in addition to more showings, it's probably going to get us more offers, and more offers is probably going to get us a higher price. That was the system. And we would take your house and I would do a listing contract, and then we would put it on the multiple listing service. And I would put, we're paying 3%, 2.5%, 2%, whatever it is the seller agreed to pay. And that would entice agents to show the property. So somehow they said that realtors are manipulating commissions and fixing commissions, which couldn't be further from the truth. So I don't know how it made any sense. And they said, all right, we're going to settle this. And part of the settlement was to agree not to put cooperating or compensation on the MLS anymore. So what did that do? So now I'm a realtor, I get a buyer. They want us to say, and we have to, by law, say to you, if you come to me right now and say, Victor, I saw you listing at such and such an address. I'd like to see it. I'd have to say to you, Chris, I need you to sign an agreement, whether it be a full-blown buyer's agreement or a showing agreement at the very least, and outline what our relationship is going to be and how much you are going to agree as the buyer to pay me. And you would say, whoa, wait a minute. I don't even know you. I just called you off the internet. I'm not signing anything with you. It makes it uncomfortable. And that's why we've come up with a simple buyer's agreement for the first 1 or 2 showings, where it says basically, if I show you this house, what's going to happen is, and we're going to write an offer and you decide you want to buy it, you're going to agree to do that with me because I showed it to you. And I'm also going to have to, if we decide that this isn't the house and you say you want to work with me, we're going to do a buyer's broker's agreement. So my contention with this whole thing was, people would say, well, I never had to pay the realtor before to buy a property. The seller paid them. Well, the reality is the buyer always paid them. The buyer always paid all the commission because it was just in the price of the house. You'd say, listen, Victor, I want to net 400,000. And I'd say, well, you know what? Why don't we ask 429? And by the time we back out the commissions, you're going to net 400. But it was just much easier, much more transparent. to have the seller included in the price. The other thing that it causes a problem is when it was included in the price, it was included in the mortgage. So now for a buyer who just about was able to save up the down payment and the closing costs, it's complicated that because if they have to write a buyer's agent a check and it's not included in the mortgage, that's that much more money they have to come up with. And that's how much less appealing your house becomes. And that's why it's always better to include it in the price and get the seller to agree that they will pay it at closing. In my opinion, they've caused a lot of problems, and it's changed the business a lot. And that's another place that we excel because we've done extensive training for our agents with this. And I can't tell you how many agents that we do business with that don't even know what to do. There are companies that are not brick and mortar, that are based out of somewhere in the United States, that are strictly cloud-based companies. Our advantage to being an agent here is we are cloud-based. We have anything you could think of that you want to do in the cloud. But if you need to come and sit down at a class and learn how to engage yourself in this business and do it correctly and do it successfully, that's what we pride ourselves on. We have a very extensive training program, and we have 5 people on staff that will answer your questions 24/7. And we encourage the agents to engage us when they have a question, because real estate school doesn't teach you how to do anything but pass the test. That's basically what it does. It's 64 hours of learning how to pass a pretty difficult, or 62 hours actually, I think it is, to pass an exam for the state that says the laws, but it doesn't teach you how to do business. And this changes every single day. I have 5 agents a day in my office coming in and asking me, "Hey, I never saw this. What is this? Or how do I do this?" And there's just a lot to it. It's not a business for the faint at heart. I have to tell you that, because it's a lot of responsibility. It's probably the biggest transaction people make in their lifetime is buying a house or even selling a house. It's a lot of money involved, especially now.
So do you still love real estate despite all of the bureaucrats getting into it?
I do. Listen, you have to roll with the punches. I mean, you just have to make sure you're up to date on everything. And I don't like what they just did. It's not about me, because the statistics have shown that commissions in the last year since they've done this have gone up, not gone down. So it hasn't benefited the public at all.
Yeah, it sounds like people have been given the idea, hey, we could take money off both ends now, right?
Right. Well, some people think that, they'll call us and they'll say, "Hey, I heard, that I don't have to pay a buyer's agent anymore." I said, "Yeah, we say, yeah, that's true. You never did. You never had to. There was no mandatory anything, but we just try and advise you what's best for you to do. And probably involving a buyer's agent is going to end up getting you, in the long run, more money. Your bottom line is what matters. It's like, people will shop agents based on, "Oh, well, this guy's charging me less." I guess it's like an attorney. I mean, I've had attorneys tell me they want $1,000 an hour, and I've had attorneys tell me they'll work for $200 an hour. I guess it depends on the result you want to get, because especially in real estate, I'll tell you this. I look at a lot of times statistics on MLS, and statistics will be, one of the statistics is the relationship to the asking price to the sold price. And there are realtors that have a 70, 75, 78, 8, could be anywhere. There's a wide range of lists to ask. And if you look at our company, ours is about 97%. So what I tell people is, do you want to save 2% on the commission and give up 10% on your asking price? Does that make any sense to you? That's an 8% difference. So we value what we do for you, and we place a value on that by what we would accept as commission to service your listing or to sell your house.
Okay. So going back to what you said about getting into real estate, because very much we try to explore what makes you you. Yeah. So you said that you've always been entrepreneurial and always had a business mind. Yeah.
I've always
So
had a business. I've never had a job.
okay, always had a business, right? So what made you like that? Were you born like that? What were those influences that made you that way?
I always felt that I can do it better myself. First of all, I'm not a big. I started very young. I mean, that's probably why. I was 16 years old, and my father had a flower shop, and I worked in the flower shop, and there came an opportunity next door to open a nursery, and I always liked that business, and I convinced my father to lease the spot, and I learned the nursery business. And at 16 years old, I said, you know what, Dad, can't go to school anymore. This business is exploding. I got to quit. And I ended up quitting school at 16 years old. And I just saw the benefit of, at that time, going to work for somebody for $6, $7 an hour, or, I mean, it was a long time ago, or working for myself. I saw very early on that financially, it was much better to control your own destiny, and you would make much more as the owner or the boss or whatever you want to call it. So I always had a job, I mean, I never had a job. I mean, I always had a business. I started, like I said, at 16 years old, and it just progressed from there. Like, um, a lot of people think they want to go into business, especially real estate, because they could work less and make more money. I was a workhorse when I was 16 years old. I worked 7 days a week. My day off, I'll call it, was closing the nursery at 2 o'clock on a Sunday, because I was there on Sunday till 2 o'clock. And I learned a huge work ethic. And I think, I look at all this stuff now on Facebook, people, knocking the billionaires, and, oh, they have too much money, and, they should be paying more taxes. And listen, I can't tell you how many times I've taken a loan or put my house up to get money to go into a business, and who's going to be left holding the bag if it didn't work? Knock wood, most of the times it worked, but I've had some bad experiences in business. I wasn't always successful. I did learn that if I don't, there's been times I've been impulsive and gone into a business without doing a business plan and thinking clearly through it. And I will tell anybody, if you're going to go into a business, including becoming a real estate agent, because you are you are basically going into your own business. There's no accountability. You have to have a good work ethic. You have to have a budget, because you may not make any money for the first 3, 6 months, or maybe even a year till you build up the business. So a business plan is very, very important. It's the roadmap to where you're going to start, and it's the roadmap to where you're going to wind up. And I think that's been key in the last 20 years to being who we are, because we expanded from here. We own a title company in addition to the real estate office. And listen, I'm 69 years old and probably could retire. And there's days I had a guy that wanted to buy the business actually for a good amount of money, a much larger competitor. And one Friday when I was thinking about doing it, I said, maybe I'll stay home today. And then I thought about it, and I said, what am I going to do if I stay home? So I think the drive is in you. I don't think everybody's an entrepreneur, because I'm sorry about that. So I don't think everybody's an entrepreneur, and I've watched it time after time. I've watched, a friend of mine who's a great construction guy. I mean, he's a great contractor. He could do anything. He could do electrical. He could do plumbing. He could do carpentry. He could do concrete. He could do roofing. He could do it all. but he shouldn't be in business. He's the worst businessman I've ever seen in my life. He doesn't know how to write a contract that will keep him ahead of the job. He doesn't know how to collect money. He doesn't know how to budget money. So there's a lot to it. It's not easy. And I do rely a lot, not as much anymore, but I don't like to reinvent the wheel. So I will always look to people who were successful in my industry, and I like to copy. Certain people do certain things better than I could even think about, and I'll take their system and I'll alter it. Um, I'll take their way of doing business, and I may change it a little, and make it my own. But you have to be open to new ideas, and you have to be adventuresome because it could lead to a lot of different places.
So there's a couple of things of what you said there that I often think about. So you said not everyone could be an entrepreneur, and you also talked about taking loans, right? And I think in some way those two things are linked and related because it's about what's your view of risk? Yeah. I
Big
think
time.
some people have a view that, oh, I could lose this. And other people would look at it and go, but if I don't do this, I risk being stuck. Okay. And I think that's quite a fundamental foundation about whether you're entrepreneurial or not, is your view. When somebody says, would you borrow £50,000 against your house to go and invest in a business, right? Some people would be thinking about losing the 50,000, and other people would be thinking, if I don't do this, I'm going to regret it, right? I have to go for it. That's how I kind of see entrepreneurialism linked to risk, and the ability to go, well, if I do that, I'm going to have to make it work, right? How do you see entrepreneurialism and risk connected, or don't you?
I do, absolutely. It's all about risk. I mean, that's why when I see these people annoyed at these entrepreneurs that have borrowed money and put their life on the line in order to take the risk to make something work, and say, well, they make too much money. Why don't I make the same as they do? Because you didn't take the risk. You didn't stay away from your family, and work 7 days a week. You didn't go home at 9 o'clock at night. You went in at 9 in the morning, you came home at 5, and you got your paycheck. And that's fine. Being the operator or the entrepreneur is not, like I said, there's a book out there, The E-Myth, and it addresses that. And I remember I haven't read it in years, but part of it was, the guy was a great baker, and he could bake any kind of cake and he could bake any kind of bread. But when he opened the bakery, he fell flat on his face because he couldn't operate a business. Right now, today, I have an application in for $1 million line of credit. And what I want to do with the $1 million is I have flipped houses. I've probably flipped 10 houses. And I think the market is good again because prices have stabilized for a lot of reasons. And sales are down and people are getting anxious to sell their homes. And I think there's some great buys out there. And anybody that's thinking about buying a home, I'll say this: people say, well, when's the right time to buy? And I say, when you can afford it. So if you can afford to buy a home right now, buy it, and don't worry about what the mortgage rate is, because you can buy the house and just rent the rate, because if mortgage rates come down, you just do a refi. But I think it's a great time right now to flip houses. And I have some money to do it, but I'd like to get into higher priced homes. It seems that the higher priced homes are actually selling better than the lower priced homes. So I just put in an application for a $1 million line of credit. Is it a risk? Of course it is. The market could collapse tomorrow. The fundamentals don't suggest that, but anything can happen, or I could make the wrong move on a house and, find that there's something that we didn't see that's really wrong with it. But I'm going to do it because I think without risk, there's no reward. And usually the bigger the risk, the bigger the reward. So, like I said, I'm getting ready to retire. So I would even do that as a retirement, because I never see myself sitting home or playing golf every day or going out on my boat every day. I need I think it keeps some people, it keeps alive. I watched my father wanted to retire so he could lay on the couch and watch TV all day. And I got to tell you, he died at a young age because you got to keep moving. You got to keep your brain going. You got to keep your body moving. And it's all about, again, it's about drive, and it's about what makes you happy.
So just moving to a different subject then, you talk about having 80 agents, right? So tell me a little bit about how you find 80 good agents.
Well, I was very lucky, and we have a very good system. So I will tell you about that. When we left Prudential, we were the top producers in our office, and they had about 80 or 90 agents there at the time. This was probably 25, 26 years ago. And when we left, everybody said, well, you help us all the time. We want to go with you. So we probably took half of their agents. So I had a good base to start, 40 or 50 agents. And agents bring agents. A lot of times an agent will make a move and say to a friend, why don't you come over? It's really good over here. So we happen to buy into a system that even makes it better, because if you're an agent here, if I hired you tomorrow and a friend of yours got their real estate license and you brought them and said, you got to come over and talk to Victor because, we have a lot of things going on here. We have a lot of support. They do a lot of things for us. Good commission split, great training, good place for you to come. And you introduce them to me and they join the company, you will be paid 10% or an amount equivalent to 10% of whatever their production is on every deal they do for as long as you and they are with the company, or so as long as they're with the company, I should say. So if you bring over somebody and they generate 50,000 in gross commission, as these commissions are generated, you're going to get a check for 10% off the top. So a $15,000 commission generated would be 10% to you. I myself and my wife have brought on enough people that we've made over $1 million in single level residuals, is what they are, in the last year. In the last 23 years, however long we're with the company, we've made over $1 million in single level residuals. It's a good amount of money every year. It's an incentive for agents to bring agents over, and it's a great way to build a business. However, that isn't where I stop. I actually had an on-staff recruiter at one time who did a good job, but believe it or not, the system worked against us because he was getting a percentage of everybody he hired. And once he hired enough people, he got lazy because he was making 100 grand a year without even hiring another person. So he ended up, we parted ways because they said, I can't pay you a salary if you're not going to hire anybody else. And he chose to just collect his 10% for however long he stayed with the company. But we've just actually initiated we spent about $40,000 we hired a company that's going to do the social media, create the funnels for people to actually click on and ask for material. And they built a recruiting website, and they're going to assist us because I want to do I would like to bring on 20 or 30 more good agents. And this way, when I do decide to retire, whenever that is, it'll bring us more money for the company. So always, that's the basic. It's a huge part of being a broker that you have to recruit. Now, I could tell you this, a few years ago, we had to recruit just to replace who we lost because we had a big turnover. And the reason we had a big turnover was our commissions were a little bit below par. But since we've raised agents' commission, we've actually given them the ability to earn over 100%. When I say that, that's if they have people that they've brought in. But their commission alone could cap out at 100%. and they could actually, I have a number of people that by April or May have done enough business where we say, all right, you owe us nothing for the rest of the year. You're at 100% till next year. And we don't have a big turnover anymore because everybody is, we used to lose people because somebody else would say, we'll give you 10% more, but they're at a point now where people are not giving them 10% more. And they're certainly not giving them the tools that we give them. We give them, I mean, we just started a new program where for real estate agents, the best thing they can do, and we've learned this from a trainer by the name of Brian Buffini, and anybody that's listening to this should Google who Brian Buffini is. Brian Buffini has the largest real estate training company in the world. He came here as an immigrant with 80 bucks in his pocket, started painting houses, and then got into real estate. And what Brian preaches is, and when I say preaches is, he stands by what he sells, is it's much cheaper and much less effort to build a business by keeping people that you've done business with as your clients than it is to go out and find new business. And that's probably the case in any business. I mean, a restaurant, a lot of businesses, you want repeat business. And the average person does probably a real estate transaction in South Florida every 6 or 7 years. I've watched videos of people, and there was a company that actually sold what we bought, I think, where they would go into they went into a picnic area and they asked people, when was the last time you bought a house? And they would say, oh, like 3 years ago. Say, who was your agent? And they'd say, gee, I don't remember. She was a nice girl, but I don't know. And they'd look at his wife and say, who was our real estate agent? No, I don't remember. Because agents don't keep in touch with the people they've done business with. And that's what Brian Buffini teaches you to do. Now, not everybody here has taken Buffini. A lot of them have. So one of the keys is to keep in touch with your people. And there's a whole protocol to do this. But what we've done recently, and we're paying for it for the agents, is when my agent closes a deal, my administrator takes the name of that person and submits it to a company, and over a 5-year period, they will send 6 branded magazines to the agent who sold the home and 13 postcards to that person. And agents mean to do it, but they don't. Some of them don't want to spend the money. Some of them don't want to take the time. So now we're doing it for them. This is a critical tool for anybody that wants to build their sphere in this business and build their client base. We do that. And I mean, we do things like we'll do your flyers for you for your open houses, for your just listed. We've just brought in the tools to do luxury listings, including, availability to advertise in, like the Wall Street Journal and Global Mansion and the Robb Report, Unique Homes. So we got it together. We have all the systems and we have all the tools. We'll even subsidize an agent that gets a luxury listing and subsidize them so that they can do all this advertising and pay for it at the end when they sell the listing. And if they don't sell the listing, they pay nothing. So we've got it after 25 years or 23 years. I think we got it about right.
And one of the things you mentioned earlier, and I'll come back to what you just said in a second, but you mentioned earlier in terms of training people about the new rules and regulations. So do you have a learning management system? Do you use technology in your business for that kind
Somewhat. Of so we have a hub right now, and every agent has access to the hub. And on the hub are all the forms that we have. There's links to the MLS. There's links to Dotloop, which is our transaction management program, which we pay for the agents also. But there's links to different trainers. Some of them are like Brian Buffini, Jeff Lobb, Ifoma Pierre. But as far and some of them do go into this, what's gone on recently, But that training we did hands-on, because it was a little bit of trial and error, because agents would come back and say, well, I'll give you an example. An agent came back and said, I kind of feel like I was taken advantage of, because the process is an agent gets a buyer and the buyer says, I'd like to see such and such a property. So the agent will call the listing agent and say, hi, I want to find out showing instructions for your property. And I'd like to know, do you have any agreement in place with the seller? Is the seller offering compensation? Because we do have buyers that tell us we don't want to see any house unless the seller's paying your compensation. We need it to be included in the price. Although we tell them we can negotiate that sometimes we can't. So they'll say, don't show us anything unless you're being compensated by the seller. And we say, okay. So this person called and they said, yes, we're going to be paying 2.5%. And they took them at their word. And, before it was on MLS. So if it was on MLS, you knew what you were getting. MLS was a promise to pay. And this person told them they're going to get 2.5%. They saw the house, they submitted an offer, and they came back and they said, no, well, at that price, they'll take your offer, but we're only paying 1%. So what we've done to avoid that, and I think everybody should do, is we actually even built a website where we upload the seller compensation form, and we tell you as an agent, go to www.exitpays.com, and you can download the compensation form and consider that what you'll be paid. I would have told my seller, we agreed to pay 2.5%, so we're paying 2.5%. If you don't want to agree to that price, let's up the price a little bit and go back with a counter offer. And I would have made the deal work. I bet on it. But we learned a lesson. So we told agents now, you got to get it in writing. Get it in writing what the seller is going to be paying.
Absolutely. Okay. But going back to all of these ideas you told me about, where does that innovation come from?
Necessity.
Necessity. Okay.
You've heard the expression, necessity
I've
is the
heard the
mother of
expression.
invention.
Yeah.
That's where it's come from. That's where, the compensation site came from. And a lot of the ideas I get, I'll give you something where we really differentiate right now in this area from anybody. Many years ago, when we joined Prudential had what they called value range pricing. Okay. And what value range pricing is you're, instead of listing a price that the seller is asking, you're listing a range in which the seller would accept an offer, depending on the terms and conditions. And when I saw that at Prudential, I said to my wife, I said, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. She said, why? And I said, because who's going to offer more than the lowest price? So at that time, houses were a lot less. So you'd see like seller will entertain offers between 225,000 and 250,000, depending on terms and conditions. And I'd say, of course, that somebody's going to offer 225. And then I come to realize that what it did was it made people aware. And I actually went to ChatGPT recently and said, what's the benefits of range pricing? And it clarified it real quick. Not anything I didn't really know, but it put it into words better than I could have. And what it basically says is it shows flexibility on the seller side. So a buyer says, hey, that's a flexible seller. Let's go in and make an offer, or let's go see it. So it brought a lot more eyes on it. It allowed you to, if a seller wanted X as an asking price, and I'll give you an example because an example is always better. We had a seller that said, I want $1,550,000 for that. They started at $1,600,000. 6 months later, and we told them it's way too high. And 6 months later, it didn't sell, and they relisted it. And they said, I'll drop the price to $1,550,000. And we said, listen, you're still a little too high. So finally, I said to them, listen, what is the bottom line that you would take? If I brought you a buyer today and they offered you $1.4 million cash, close whenever you want to close, no repairs, would you take $1.4 million for the property? And they said, no, but I would take $1.45 million. I said, perfect. So let's list this house and list it. Seller will entertain offers between $1,450,000 and $1,550,000, depending on terms and conditions. Now, when you list it in MLS, there used to be, but there is no longer. In fact, I went before the board and see if they would reinstate it, but I haven't heard back. There used to be a place to put range pricing right in the pricing. So what you have to do now is you have to put the lower price. So you have to put the lower price of $1,450,000 and put in the broker's remarks, seller will entertain offers between $1,450,000 and $1,550,000. And that lets them know that maybe they might take $1,450,000 depending on what you're offering. Or maybe you have to go for a little bit more, somewhere in between there. The key to it is the house lists on MLS at $1,450,000. So at $1,550,000, when I listed that house, if you were looking in a range from $1.2 million to $1.5 million, you didn't see that house. Now there's more eyes on it because you're going to see it. If you're searching under $1.5 million, you're going to see that house. And if you're searching above $1.5 million, you're still going to see that house. And that's like a perfect example because that's the break point. You know, you're probably searching from $1.2 million to $1.5 million. The most I want to pay is $1.5 million. Or you're searching from $1.5 million to $1.8 million, and you're going to see it. So it brings a lot more eyes on the subject, which brings you a lot more showings, which sometimes brings offers because now somebody that wouldn't have seen it before is going to see it. So happened in this. Go ahead.
You've got a very commercial and curious outlook, though, that's made you go and work out how the systems work, understand your options, and you've researched gaming, you know, price bands and understanding psychology there, right? That's actually quite, that, you know, goes back to the entrepreneurial thing.
But let me tell you this too. It worked.
Yeah.
What I just lost. Hold on. I just screwed up the screen a little. We can't see you right now. Okay, there we go. It worked because I can tell you 5 listings, and my wife, she still sells. She helps with some of the training, but she still sells. And she's tougher to convince than anybody, but I convinced her to do it on some of her listings. And she just went to the people and said, listen, we need a price reduction. You know, bottom line is, what would you take for this house if I brought you a cash buyer, and they closed when you want to close, and they didn't ask you to do any repairs? And they gave her the bottom line, and she said, great. Then why are we listed all the way up here? She did it with about 5 or 6 houses, and houses that couldn't get a showing were sold in a matter of 3-4 weeks because of this. You got to think out of the box a little bit sometimes, and that's the point. A lot of people don't get it. I'm going to tell you the conversation with this guy at $1 million, the one I just told you, the example at $1.5 million. He does it on his wife's prodding him to do it, and calls me the next day and said, I just got off the phone with my lawyer and you're going to get me sued. I said, how am I going to get you sued? He said if I advertise it at $1.450 million, I have to take $1.450 million. I said, I don't know where this guy got his law license, but that's not a fact. There's many components to a contract other than the price. So basically what you're telling me is if I send you over an offer at $1.450 million, don't even show it to your lawyer, because whatever the rest of the 12 pages says, you have to take the offer. And that's just not true. There's a lot of components to a contract. So like I said, we try and think a little bit outside the box, and we try and do what it takes to get people's property sold. I mean, we even have, on our website, we probably have over the years, and I don't know, probably a lot of them are not looking anymore, but we have 40,000 people on our website that subscribe. So what we started doing recently is to help get homes sold is as soon as we get a listing, it goes to our tech guy and he does reverse prospecting on our website. And he actually sends the agent a report and says, we had 75 people on the site looking for a house similar to yours. So we sent them your listing. And that's another way to get homes sold for people. It just goes on and on. I mean, there's just, we try and do whatever we can do to make it work is what we do.
You talked about necessity earlier on, right? But I suspect that you spot necessity earlier than other people may spot necessity. Yeah.
Maybe because I don't know anybody else that's doing range pricing right now. And I told somebody who's big in this business, they have a $2 billion company. They do $2 billion a year in sales. And he said, nah, that's no good. And one of the guys that works for him was there in the conversation and said, oh yeah, we used to do that. That's good. And it's funny, a month later, I spoke to the guy and he said, yeah, I've been thinking about that range pricing. We just might, bring it into our system, he said.
So, but just to ask you the question in a different way then. So, I mean, we build technology. One of our products is Suspicion Engine, and the idea is that it tries to look at all the data and work out weak signals or trends and things that may go wrong. Yeah. And some people wake up one day and go, I've got no money in the bank account, right? But I suspect you wake up and go, things seem to be going a bit slower now, right? How do you run your business? Is it by gut? Is it by data? Is it by KPIs? How do you run your business, Victor?
It's somewhat by data, but you know what? The best data I rely on is my own data. So I keep spreadsheets on I keep spreadsheets on our numbers, how much we do. And I do look at reports. And I mean, I look at articles all the time and, sales are up, or I look at competitors. Sales are down, sales are up. But what I really look at is my February compared to my February last year and the February before that. Right now, we're consistent with small gains or keeping the same level. And by what I'm reading, as far as the pain, listen, I also, let me say this. We're invited twice a year. Exit has what they call Top Broker Mastermind. And the last one we went to was we went to one in Colorado and we went to one in Orlando or in Tampa. And the next one's going to be in Orlando in May. So it's about 30 or 40 brokerages, and the broker comes there and we discuss what's going on in everybody's market. So a couple of things. My market could be very different than their market. And even South Florida could be different to the West Coast, because MLS is very good, and the Realtors Association is very good about supplying us with data that's going on. And I do view all the data, but I don't necessarily buy into all of it because it doesn't concern me. I mean, prices and sales on the West Coast of Florida are really bad. And I'm not finding that over here. So while I do pay attention to it, I mean, we pay attention to fundamentals, because is there going to be a real estate crash? No. 50% of the homes in the United States, don't quote me on the numbers, but it's around or just shy of 50% of the homes in the United States are owned outright. And another 30% have over 50% in equity. So nobody's walking out of their homes for any reason. They'll try and sell it, but they have too much equity in their homes. I look at that kind of stuff. And do I wish I had, I'm a little old to get the technology that quickly, how to use it. But getting data from guys like you is key in this business. Using AI is key in this business. there's a lot, like our website now, it just leverages AI to what a consumer's thinking, or it's even communicating with them, like sending them texts. So we tested it one day and we said, we went on and posed as a guy that signed on to the website. And when it said, this is Alex, which is AI, is the AI sending them the message, how can I help you? And the guy replied to Alex and said, I'm looking to be in Florida, but I want to be in an area that I can have horses. And I know the answer is Wellington. It's horse country. It's like one of the horse capitals of the world. And that AI came and said, Wellington is a wonderful area. It's has great value. It's the horse capital of the United States, and blah blah. And went on and gave him a whole scenario on what Wellington's about. So technology is the future. I employ it as much as I can. And like the company I just hired to do the marketing to recruit agents, they use a lot of that. So while I may not use it hands-on as much, I hire guys like your company, or like the company that we're using, because when they do the social media, then they know how to leverage what they're doing so it goes to the right people. I don't know how to do that, but you got to.
I think you're right. You outsource to experts, right?
Yes.
You're the why think you have to do everything yourself and that you're brilliant at everything? It's not true, right?
My motto is I don't want to do anything. They call me the delegator.
Yeah.
Because to get an idea, I get our staff in a room and I say, I want to do this. How do we do this? Who should do? You want to do that? Okay, you're going to do that. Oh, you're going to find a company that could do that? Okay, find the company that put me on a call and let's get the people to do that. Our CEO is a man by the name of Steve Morris, who I think it's about 27 years, started the exit system with the single level residuals. And it's a private company. It's not publicly held. We're not the biggest, but I'd say we're one of the best. But his motto from when I joined this company, he always told us, do what you do best and delegate the rest. And I live by that motto.
Right. I like that. The delegator. That's going to be the title of this podcast. So we're running out of time now. And so just to wrap up, what words of advice would you give to somebody starting off now in their career?
In the real estate business?
In the real estate business, yeah.
Make sure you're funded and you have a budget, and you have enough capital to last you at least 6 months. Do a business plan. Train. You never know enough. You don't know what you don't know. And commission splits are secondary, especially when you start. Get with a company that's going to hold your hand. A company that's going to train you, and a company that's going to definitely look out for your well-being. So give me a call.
Fair enough. Thank you, Victor. That was great. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Chris. I appreciate it.